Hello everyone and welcome to the Open AGI Forum. We are broadcasting from GOSIM Hangzhou 2025, which is held in Hangzhou, a famous historical and cultural city in China. I'm your host Eric Wang, an editor with CSTN and a member of the GOSIM sport team. So today we're honored to be joined by a true pillar of the open source AI community, Alexy. So Alexy is the AI community architect at Neo4j, a co-founder of the AI Alliance. So to begin, could you please take a brief introduction of yourself to our audience and share a bit about the journey that led you to become an architect for the AI communities?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Eric, and thank you, GOSIM organizers, for having us here. It's a beautiful city. It's my first time in China ever, and I am enjoying it, and I see the power of the vibrant open source ecosystem you built here, and I think that's something the world needs to know about. So I personally came here to meet you guys, and I'm very impressed. So I've been building communities in the Bay Area and then around the world since 2011. I got my PhD in computer science, and I moved to the Bay Area to basically work in startups. And I used programming language called Scala, Twitter was written in Scala. My PhD was the first PhD analyzing Twitter, influence on Twitter, social networks, and I discovered Justin Bieber, if people remember who that is, when he was a boy, not a big guy right now.
He's a boy.
So he was 12 years old. Yeah. Nobody knew about him, all right, because all little girls were fans of Justin Bieber, but little girls don't talk to adults about their crush. So, I found that basically I needed to use Scala meetups were dormant. So I organized one. It was very small. It was a room like this, about 30 people. And we went around the circle, introducing ourselves, and in the middle of the circle, some guy said some opinions about programming, and they started arguing, so we didn't even finish the circle. We got into the business of programming, and then I grew to the biggest Scala meetup in the world. We started Spark meetup at my meetup, so Matej Zacharia was a graduate student. He presented Spark, then presented Kafka, and we really linked a whole bunch of developers. So in 2013, I started a conference, which became Scale by the Bay, or Scala by the Bay, then Scale by the Bay. I did Data by the Bay, and AI by the Bay. So it's basically the longest running independent conference. And we started AI Meetup also around 2015 before deep learning. So it's the longest continuously running AI Meetup. And so from there, basically, I've seen this intersection of open source, AI, and community, which now I think is the key. It powers the growth of AI. You cannot have true AI or AGI in the future without any of this. You need open source, you need AI technology, and you need community. So I think what you guys are doing is very much on the point as well, because community is the power of everything. It's all humans. You can think it's technology, but if you see, it's really people. That's my belief.
Yeah, you just say it's your first time been to China.
Yes.
But it's your second GOSIM, right? Because I see you have been to the GOSIM Paris.
Correct. And so when I went to GOSIM Paris, I've seen the vibrant ecosystem of Chinese open source AI. So the dozens of companies presented there. And so I had a feeling, we say tip of the iceberg, right? I need to go to China. I need to see for myself the whole iceberg. And of course, I don't have the time to see the whole iceberg, but I see more of it. And I believe that such a big and vibrant ecosystem will have an impact on the world. Right, so everybody needs to pay attention, and as a community organizer, I feel the power of the community. I see the energy of the community. So to me, it's very important to understand and connect and kind of become an ambassador between different communities.
Yeah, you talk about iceberg. It's really missing about the Queen, the Alibaba Queen. Yeah, it's actually really popular outside of China, and especially in open source community. But in China, Queen is not that popular. There's the iceberg of China. Right. So your title is AI Community Architect.
Correct.
So this is fascinating and unusual role. What does being an architect for a community truly mean to you beyond just organizing events?
Yes, so in the last 10 years, I effectively joined companies who knew about my work, and kind of we collaboratively, crafted my function. So AI Community Architect means several things. First of all, it means I actually build communities and I run communities, right? So I created Bay Area AI. Recently, I created AI Agent SF, the fastest growing agentic AI meetup with IBM, which now is the most popular agentic meetup in San Francisco Bay Area. 2 weeks ago, I went to Berlin and we started AI Agent Berlin. right? So I know how to create communities, I know how to find startups which are going to host meetups, I know how to find speakers, and I kind of understand the topics, right? I can create technical programs. When I was at IBM, I used a different environment, the corporate environment. I started a program called Open Source Science as the open source strategy for IBM research. And so I was director of open source science. I helped IBM sponsor Neo4j, which is PyData home for PyData, Python data stack, right? And so you know, being an architect means you figure out how do you build communities and how you sustain communities. So like when I'm at a corporation like IBM, I can help it sponsor and run a program. When I'm at a smaller company like Neo4j, however global present, I can use our DevRel network around the world, so I can do more meetups and do special events. Then we joined Linux Foundation, so I work with Linux Foundation for AI and data. I was the founding chair of Gen AI Commons there. It's, again, an organization within Linux Foundation, and that gathered many people. So Annie Lai is now my successor as the chair of that, right? So, and she was the host of GOSIM. Kind of, you know, and the AI Alliance is something I created with IBM and Meta. So when basically IBM saw what we were doing in open source science, it inspired them to and other things to do their own AI alliance, which is IBM and Meta, and they added about 200 companies. And that's kind of a different organization, so I worked from the very beginning to set up that organization, to personally invited 30 companies, including Databricks, Snowflake, and companies like Anyscale, startups, universities like Berkeley and Dartmouth, and University of Pennsylvania, Northeastern. So kind of, you know, non-profits, right, Neo4j and Linux Foundation also members. So the idea is that, you know, you build a community, you think who are gonna be good combination of members, because you need big companies, you need small companies, you need startups, you need non-profits, you need universities. You think, right, like it's like a team, like you're building a winning team. You need diversity, right? You can't have just like one kind of member. So what does the community look like, which is gonna add the most value to your open source projects, right? Which are going to create projects, which are going to move the needle, make an impact on the world.
Yeah, it seems like you start really beginning with the computer science, but your background is in physics. So
correct.
How does that change, and what is really shaped your path of work?
Well, you know, I grew up in Soviet Union, and you know, it's very similar to China. A huge emphasis on STEM education. And so, you know, when I grew up, like my whole family are physicists. My father invented the first plasma engine, which was sent into space. So he's a plasma physicist. He was a plasma physicist. My brother, my older brother, followed and also became a plasma physicist. And kind of, I followed the path. And I think there was much more education for physicists. And so I went kind of, you know, math school, physics. But, you know, every physicist at that point became kind of, there was a rise of PC. And so I became kind of interested in programming, and then the programming became more interested in physics. But I think physics gives you a very good confidence, first of all, that you can solve any problem with approximation, which computer scientists don't have. Like if you see computer scientists printing numbers, they print 17 digits. Who cares, guys? You can round it to 3, right? And like you don't need to take the space on screen with all these numbers, but it doesn't occur to them, right? They're not trained. Right, like they're not thinking like, you know, you don't need all these digits, right? So physics gives you a lot of common sense. So I love the fact that kind of I got very good education in physics. I probably forgot most of it, but it gave me kind of, first of all, the confidence. Any problem can be solved with kind of back on the envelope computation, estimation, right? And also kind of numerical analysis for practical purposes. I think this is very important in the age of AI, that computer science is not the end. Like we have AI agents now going to the world. We have robots, right? Like they obey the laws of physics. Like I think you need to go beyond computer science now with AI.
Yeah, then let me add a question. So what major do you think the students in the AI era should learn? Yeah,
so you know, my other hobby, I really like history and I like philosophy. So for instance, my favorite philosopher and historical figure is Cicero, the Roman philosopher and statesman. And so Cicero writes, if you read Cicero in translation, unfortunately I don't read Latin, but I read him in Russian, then in English, he writes extremely clearly. And Cicero said a very important thing. He said, we can understand absolutely everything if we go steadily, piecemeally, step by step in learning, and we write down what we have already learned. which is exactly what agents need to do, right? The AI memory is about going steadily and recording your understanding of the world. So I would advise students not to focus just on STEM. It's very easy for students in Russia, China, like we're kind of trained to do STEM. Go beyond STEM, study history, study philosophy. I read a lot of history of China. When I came to Hangzhou, I knew that this is the end of the Grand Canal, the summer, capital of the Qing dynasty, that the Marco Polo traveled through here. So I went to these places because I wanted to see them, right? And it really enriches your understanding of the world. And with agents, we talk in natural language. So I can give you a little anecdote, early example. So the founders of Kaggle. So the founder, one of the founders of Kaggle, his wife is a lawyer. So the ChatGPT just arrived. They started talking to it, right? And the startup guy was asking it questions, and it was pretty fuzzy. And remember, like it was hallucinating. But his wife, who's a lawyer, she started interrogating ChatGPT very precisely, and it's starting giving up good answers, right? So if you know rhetorics, if you're trained, for instance, as a lawyer, you are qualified to talk to AI much better because you know how to reason, how to formulate your arguments. So I think it's very important now to get like critical thinking, general education, in addition to STEM, right? So that's what I would advise people to do. And like, of course, if you're in robotics and physics and material science, right, this is all very important. But I think because we talk to agents in natural language, you should become broadly educated person with good rhetorics, good rhetorical skills. Do public speaking. Don't be afraid to talk to kind of people, agents, right? I think that's kind of my advice.
I see. So what was the single most important lesson you learned in the early days of organizing meetups and conference at that two guys you work today?
Mm-hmm. Well, so what I found is that unfortunately, a lot of people in engineering are shy, right? And like they're shy. And I was really surprised because I came from Russia, which is supposed to be not free, to America, which is the freest country in the world. And you know what is the biggest fear of Americans? What are Americans the most afraid of?
No free.
They're afraid of public speaking. Number one fear. So, which is surprising, right? Given that Americans are supposed to be outspoken people, because everybody is afraid to be judged. So what happens is, if people who have knowledge and they can share it, generally they will be a little bit reluctant. But what I found is that if you give them a little nudge, especially if you find somebody who's very good, and you put them up to speak, and then they share their knowledge, everybody wins because the person becomes a speaker and community leader. The audience learns about it. So my goal is effectively to find these people, right? Like I don't usually speak at my events. Like on my conference, I only spoke at my conference after 10 years. I gave the first talk at my conference, one of the speakers canceled. And I actually had something to talk about, right? So I don't do that. I find good speakers for different areas, and I invite them to speak. And that kind of changed kind of the way I approach this. And I just done this in Berlin because I know this so well. Not only I found speakers for my meetup, I actually found that some of my friends moved to Berlin from Turkey, and like some people moved to Berlin, so I immediately put together a team of organizers. So I left Berlin, but they're gonna keep it going month after month, right? So I kind of understand which people make good teams, and I kind of just give them a little nudge, and that's keeps the community going.
I see. So you call your events as the thought conference. So what is the essential difference between a thought conference and the standard tech conference and the meetup like GOSIM, and why is that distinction so important to you?
Well, so by the way, events, we call them thoughtful software engineering. So we kind of, so first of all, and I think we share this with the GOSIM, we are not a vendor event, right?
Yeah.
If you notice, during COVID, majority of events have died. And what happened is independent events died, but conferences are run by vendors. So the vendors like Databricks, Snowflake, they have big summits. Oracle, now like Salesforce has a big convention, Dreamforce, right? So this is important because they're big ecosystems, but they're all vendor ecosystems, right? So they want to sell, and all the kind of sponsors are live in the ecosystems. It's a very one-sided view. So our events are independent. We only accept talks on merit, and we can do completely fair comparisons. And we also lean to open source. So we do not allow purely marketing talks. You can market your startup, you have to, but you have to teach us something. Show us some technology, preferably open source, right? And if it's closed source, you have to teach us something. We need to learn something about your technology, which will kind of expand our mind. So we generally focus on this, and year on year we build this reputation that this is an excellent technical conference, right? Very deep and very good for learning. So we earn that, and kind of we keep going with that, and I think it's, it will stay, because in any environment there is hype, especially now AI hype is enormous. You really need to focus very specifically to find like what is the essence here, right? And kind of separate it from the hype, focus on people who do really interesting stuff and that can teach others.
Okay, so next question is, why is your blog called Chief Scientist?
Oh yeah, it's very simple. So in 2014, I joined a company called Nitro, and I became its first chief scientist. So Nitro was a company, early company in AI. They were doing smart documents. So they, competitor of Adobe, they make a cloud platform for PDF understanding. So they actually came up with this notion that a document can have an API, and you can talk to your document before even deep learning happened, right? So we used early tools of machine learning, which are now kind of very quaint, but natural language processing, right? So I was its first chief scientist, and that kind of was my role, to be the chief scientist in a growing global company. It went public in Australia, and now it was acquired by private equity. So yeah, that's kind of the history of that. But also that kind of reflects my role. I'm trained as a scientist. I approach things scientifically. So I like that role. I like to kind of understand how technology works, how community works, right? It's kind of like if you're a scientist, you always are curious. You always scrutinize things.
Yeah. So what is we can say, first principles? So to you, what is the fundamental definition of intelligence?
It's an interesting question, right? I mean, we kind of now think of when like people formulate agents, we kind of focus on planning and reasoning, right? I think that there are probably important things like beliefs, right? There are very important things as beliefs. And it's very interesting because somebody joked to me, China is so prosperous, they don't get stuck on religion, that only two beliefs, that we work and that we die. Oh. Right? Because we can all agree on this, right? Yeah. There is no disagreement. People don't waste time on religious disagreements. But, like different people have different beliefs, right? You have personal beliefs, you have your preferences. So I think it's very important, right? Like I mean, we love some things, right? Like I like photography, right? I'm a photography enthusiast. I guess, everybody has their own preferences. So I think that's very important, right? Like you value something, like you like history or like sports, whatever, right? So I think that's important. Like the intelligence probably is tied to beliefs. Also love is important, like love in general sense, like you love children, you love life, right? So I think there are some things which are hard to quantify. Like so whatever we kind of put in the agents, I think it's a limited version, right? I mean, but again, this is human intelligence, right? Like I'm a believer in embodied intelligence. So I think the work here, which actually I think China is a pioneer of embodied AI, which is very interesting to me.
Believe embodied AI? Yeah.
I think embodied AI, like I've seen presentation by the Beijing Academy of AI and by Yanghua Lin, and like that's what's super impressive, right? And the work they do, and I think that requires like whole amount of chips research, like physics, robotics. It's very hard. Yeah. That's why it's not actually yet advanced, because it needs a lot of investment. So I think what's actually happening in BAI is very important. People need to watch it. right? Because I think embodied AI is very important, I think, for something which is compatible with the humans.
So do you believe the current path of scaling models is leading us closer to understanding intelligence, or are we just becoming better at building mimics?
You know what's interesting? So I'm actually a big fan of small models. And so in the AI Alliance, we have a group of folks who actually are very effective operating in Asia, in industrial kind of consortia in China and Japan. And they actually build systems called small specialized agents, right? And domain-specific agents. So I think, for instance, for factory automation, you don't need a large model. You need a small model. And so recently there's been a rise where like a billion parameter model of today is better than a 175 billion parameter GPT-3 if for specific purposes, right? So you can have models trained for factory automation, for programming, for computer use. So I believe that a lot of tasks will be done by specialized models, right? And in terms of like general intelligence and like building these large models, that's very important. But I personally think that that will not be the sole focus, right? I think kind of pushing things to the edge, making them specialized will solve majority of applications, right? And we'll see kind of where obviously, you know, scaling large models is like the frontier, but I don't know yet, you know, if that will solve like all of our problems. Right, majority of problems will be solved by specialized models.
So everyone in GOSIM is talking about open source these days, and open source is often seen as a double-edged sword, enabling rapid innovation, but also potential measures. So as a community architect, how do you think about fostering responsibility alongside openness?
Yes, so open source, you know, has been around for many years. So I met Richard Stallman. Richard Stallman, the founder of Free Software Foundation, kind of the foundational figure. So I was at the first and last meeting of the Soviet Union Unix group in 1921, before the Soviet Union collapsed. Richard Stallman was a young man who came to Russia, Soviet Union. He had a backpack full of tapes of GNU project. And he said, I need to bring them to Siberia. I need to bury them in the permafrost. Because in the case of Third World War, open source needs to survive. So he was a visionary, right? So then it was news, but of course he fought against corporations. At some point, Microsoft wanted to kill Linux. It sued Linux with SCO, Unix lawsuit, but IBM defended Linux. So basically 20 years ago, it was a very questionable proposition. Now Microsoft leapfrogged Google. They reversed now. Microsoft now more open source than Google in some ways, right? So we won the battle that open source is accepted by the corporations. But on the other hand, I think we lost a lot of community spirit because big money went into big data and open source kind of underpinning it, right? So we got this mix. And I think crypto actually poisoned a lot of this because kind of crypto equated eyeballs with money, right? Like the more you bring, the mobs you bring into this. So in that sense, like they very cynically kind of use the fact that people are interested in something to monetize. So we as open source leaders, community stewards, we need to guard the spirit of open source, right? We should basically very clearly understand that you know, corporations can use open source to make money, but communities never owned by corporations. So all the meetups I run are owned by the community. You never run meetups as corporate things. Meetups are not, you know, community like corporate properties. So then obviously people who build open source should not be exploited. They should be properly compensated if those tools are used. And it's, I think, not happening. It's very easy for corporations to take open source, use it, right? So we have a lot of pushback. For instance, Amazon at some point didn't contribute back, and a lot of people say, like, I'm not going to work for Amazon until you guys give back. And now the culture has changed. Amazon contributes, right? But it took a lot of pushback, right? And Amazon is one of the most powerful corporations. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of guts. But people are pushing back. So we need to teach corporations that people who build open source are important. This is not something you just take. You support communities who build it. And actually, I've seen a lot here in China where people understand that the corporations are very thoughtful. So I'm actually impressed. I think in many ways, and China leads in that regard. Like I see a lot of corporate support, understanding that open source is an important strategy, and I think that kind of goes with like long-term thinking, right? It's like not short-term, like let's grab some open source, let's make money out of it. No, it's like it's a community, it's like a garden. You need to nurture it.
So in your view, what is the proper relationship between independent, community-driven open source and the massive, well-founded AI labs?
So it's always tricky, right? Like you need adopters, you need companies who will adopt it, and so I think there are multiple models. You see kind of models where companies are hiring, open source companies, right? And like it's very interesting with Iceberg, right? So Databricks hired the founder of Iceberg, but Snowflake actually has a lot of people developing Iceberg. Like nobody owns the Iceberg format, right? So it's kind of it's very interesting, but generally that creates more jobs, right? So people who know Iceberg will be probably hired by one of these companies or many others, right? So you kind of you hire people. I think it's very important to support open source with grants. So when I worked with Neo4j, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, the nonprofit arm of Mark Zuckerberg, funded NumPy, SciPy, and now their direction changed. I think the funding decreased, but at some point they had a very good grant program. So I would say, if you're a big corporation and you use open source, you should think about setting up a grants program. And like even a small amount, like $100,000, which is small for a big company, can support a developer in most parts of the world who is passionate. And like companies should really create grants programs, right? And if it's hard for them to manage, CZI developed a program that they developed a lot of experience. So you can, pull together resources and use organizations like CZI and others who already distribute grants. Use that, right? Use that opportunity. So there are many ways to fund open source development. And like consider it a very important value, and support communities like yours, right? Like CSD, and obviously GOSIM. Like to do this kind of events requires a lot of sponsorship, and I see a lot of companies have figured out, and Huawei is a very important sponsor. Yep. So I really appreciate the fact that Huawei is thinking very long term. Right? Like bringing people around the world to this community will create enormous value, right? It will create enormous value, like it's network effects. So supporting open source communities, open source events is very, very important. I think one of the best things a corporation can do.
Okay, so let's get back to the time you joined Neo4j. So what's so powerful about graph technology that it compels you to focus your community building efforts on this specific domain?
What's interesting? Everybody in computer science studied graphs. So we all love graphs, right? Our social network is a graph.
Yeah.
It's very natural. Our body is a graph of cells. Our brain is a graph of neurons. Deep learning is basically big graphs of neural networks, right? So graphs are everywhere. And the graphs as a database were kind of niche technology. They used for knowledge graph, semantic web, compliance. So we're in all Fortune 500. But Gen AI created this moment where graphs became AI memory, right? And so now, especially this year, like I joined last year, it was not clear for most people, but I knew that agents are going to use graphs. And if you look at LangChain, the agentic system is called LangGraph because it's a graph of agents. So graphs are very naturally becoming memory. I was just at the Agents and Apps track where I gave a talk about knowledge graphs, and the talk after me was by a company called MemOS. So enormous amount of innovation. Like I didn't know about them. They're a Chinese company, and they presented at global conferences. So like lots of innovation. Again, like memory is a kind of graph. Like we form our memories is a hierarchy of memories. So so I think it's a very beautiful place where everybody who loves graphs can now use it for AI. And so when I go to conferences, a lot of people come to me and say, I am a user of Neo4j. Like, you can just download Neo4j. We don't know all our users. So we have a lot of users. I ask in my room, and maybe a third of people who are Chinese developers know about Neo4j, which is fascinating because we're a small company. We're under 1,000 people, right? But we've been around for 20 years. So it's pretty interesting to me that we have a huge, huge mind share around the world. which is bigger than many companies, much, much bigger size.
So is there any common mental barrier, or what is the most common mental barrier you see developers face when they first transition from traditional data structures to thinking in graphs?
That's a very good question, a very important question, and probably the hardest barrier to use graphs is that you need to construct them, right? So with vector database with Frag, you just drop a bunch of documents. It's like a little Google, it's like a meat grinder, and the thing will index it, and then you'll be looking for documents without much work. And relational databases, they're different because people put them in tables. They actually spend a lot of work putting them in tables, but there is a lot of these tables around, so it looks easy, like you can just use these tables, right? So in graph, you need to think. But the beauty of this, majority of people come into programming now with vibe coding. They never programmed. So they never programmed. What happens is if you're a new person and you're forced to do SQL, it's extremely hard. It's much harder than graph because it's unnatural. The tables happen because we did not have enough memory. So the normal forms, create foreign keys, join everything on the keys. It's very hard to model data, right? We model data as graphs. Like if I need to model a team of people, I will put them in a graph, right? And then they'll see how the collaboration goes through the graph. Like any computer system, if you look at any drawing, it's usually a graph. So we think in graphs. So if you have a newbie, they don't have baggage. It will be easy for them. They will just think of graphs, right? And agents will follow this. So I would say just kind of model the world. It's what you already do, right? Like write it down, write concepts and relationships, right? So, and that very naturally becomes a graph, and then you can then ask agents to create you the Neo4j code. So you don't need to learn Cypher. It's good if you learn Cypher, but in my talk I give an example. I talk, to agents in English, and they create this code, and the code, you can open it, you can see what the code they created, but you don't need to do this, right? You can just use it and see what happens. So I think that this is beautiful time. Everything just aligned, so you can use graphs, you can visualize the graphs immediately. You cannot visualize SQL. A graph database comes with beautiful UI, so Neo4j comes on desktop, it comes on the cloud. You can drop anything into it, you immediately see the graph, right? Any query you get can be visualized as a graph. So you have visual confirmation of the results. And I think that will help a lot of people to kind of see the data, which is important because a lot of people are not data scientists. They don't know what the data looks like. So I think just give it a try. We have, desktop is free, cloud tier is free. So like everything, you can just get going. And all the GitHub examples are open source, right? So there is a lot of ways to get started with graphs.
So once in your article, you talk about moving beyond the transformer substrates. So for our audience, could you explain what does this mean and paint a picture of what graph native AI future looks like?
Well, so there is a lot of research going on, right? So I would point out to, there is great research from Yuri Leskovitz, who is a professor at Stanford and one of the top people in graphs. So he released something called relational foundation model. So you can take any tables. A table is kind of representation of a graph which you can split. So you have customers, you have transactions, now you can have a graph. So he basically extracts this relationship as a graph, and he learns from that graph what's going to happen next. So he can actually predict people trading on the stock market, what their trades are going to be. It's fascinating. So, and you can predict customers kind of buying things in the shopping carts, and has much better results. So he adopted basically graph. He has something called graph transformer, right? So there is, on the one hand, we have deep research, right, where you change the transformer nature itself and learn graph structures at that level. However, majority of advance, I think, will happen by using AI memory, where we put things in the graph, and then, first of all, agents can walk around the graph in parallel. So it's kind of a typical team. You have a big company, everybody is doing their part of the job. So if you have a big knowledge graph representing your domain, you can have some agents kind of exploring and adding to the graph. Some agents can go validate that everything is correct, right? Some agents can check graph for compliance. So it's very easy to have a parallel system of agents working on the same graph, collaborating on the same graph. And so graph reg is this pattern where you do retrieval with the graph, And when you get some nodes, right, nodes can contain anything, so we can put embeddings in the nodes. So you can get this kind of nodes, and you can see, okay, is this node talking about what, maybe it's a chunk of a document, right, like a rag, but in the rag, you have a chunk and that's it. However, in graph rag, the chunk is linked to all the other chunks, plus it can be linked to a summary. So you can say, I don't know what it's really talking about. Can you check if this is about Apple the fruit or Apple the iPhone? And you can look at the summary. The summary says this is something about iPhones, right? So the structure of the graph will let agents reason better. You can find connections between different nodes, and you can add connections, right? So anytime you discover some important feature, you can add more connections. So every time you do your reasoning, you enrich the graph. And so there is this interesting kind of theorem that in the end, every graph becomes fully connected. Every node will be connected to every other node with some kind of relationship, right? So this is what normally happens. And so the data enrichment in graphs will kind of add all this knowledge you learn and increase the performance of the system, right? It's just like we happen with our own memories.
See. So looking forward, what's emerging trend in AI or data or other area are you personally most excited about? Perhaps one that isn't getting enough attention right now?
That's a tough question. You know, in Silicon Valley, every week they have new people, but I can recommend one of my friends, Vasily Markovich, has a startup called Cogni, based out of Berlin. So he is a pioneer for AI memory. He basically talked about AI memory when nobody talked about it. And Andrei Karpathy recently called it context engineering. So now everybody talks about that, but it was AI memory before, and it's actually not exactly the same in my mind. Right, and so Vasily recently, he goes all around, so he comes to Bay Area often. So we did this event called Graph Exchange, and with Cogni and Leta, another very fascinating startup out of Berkeley. And so Leta has this agentic framework, and we talked about basically this duality of memory and agentic reasoning. You have to have both, right? And I think Vasily is a very deep thinker. He went to graduate school to learn cognitive science. As a computer scientist, he felt in order to model human memory, you need to learn cognitive science. You need to learn how human mind works. So that's, I think, an example. You were asking, like, what to study? Study human mind, right? Study cognition, study psychology. That's another very important thing, because that can help you build AI for humans. Right? Because like we don't really care about, I mean, maybe super intelligent AI will do amazing things, but like I'm a human. I need to understand what it's doing for me, right? Like it needs to figure out how I work, right? Because it needs to present its results to me, right? And so then you need to better know how humans actually operate. Yeah. So Vasily is a great guy to follow. Leta, Cameron Pfeiffer is another very good developer, kind of relation guy who specializes, like explains things really well in a company called Model. Charles Fry is my friend who teaches developers everything about GPUs. And so Model is a platform which is basically used to scale compute. So I kind of really like these leaders in developer community. They're very good developers themselves. They're passionate. They teach others. So these are the kind of people. And like if you look at whom I invite to our meetup, these are the people to follow. Like check them out. They educate you. They teach you. Like you learn a lot. You know, you want to be like them. You want to work with them. That's kind of, they lead by example.
I see. So can you share what you see in China this time? What can established tech ecosystem like Silicon Valley learn from the energy and speed of communities here in China?
You know, I'm just a very early student of China, right? Like what I see happening, first of all, there is a lot of speed. People do things very quickly, which is amazing, right? People, then they actually conceptualize things differently. So in the US, it's very utilitarian. Like one thing we can add, Uber for pets, right? Like what can we do to take advantage of this new idea? So here people think deeply. They present kind of framework of thought, you know, the thing they do in it. Again, I think state funding of research is very important. So we have universities. BAI is a very important body, right? Exists in Europe, doesn't really exist in the US. So we have private funding, and corporations are narrow-minded. They just want to make money, right? So you know, everything is kind of attached to like time cycle, which is short. Yeah, I think it's a very interesting ecosystem, and there are like huge companies like Alibaba. Again, I learned like this is the capital of IT, right? There is Alibaba and Ant Group is here, and DeepSeek is here. That was news to me, right? Again, I had to come to Hangzhou. This is at all not a common knowledge, right? Like most people in the world, Americans will not point out where Hangzhou is, right? And then I learned like Hangzhou is kind of fifth city, right? Like after the first four up and coming. So again, like big companies, small companies, startups, universities. You have this whole ecosystem. I see a lot of activity. I still need to understand a lot of motivation. I don't yet see like in Silicon Valley it's VC funding. You say like this is Andreessen Horowitz, A16Z funded. You understand what it means. Like I don't know exactly how this works here, right? Like I don't know how much VC ecosystem is important, how it works. So I mean, but I see like the result is very fascinating. So I need to learn more. And what I think is very important that Chinese developers need to figure out how to present it to the West, so the West can collaborate with them. Because for now, it's extremely amazing, but there is not much follow-up, right? Like, because I think a lot of, like, most of the conference is Chinese, we're in China, right? But like, again, to bring it to the West, you need to think, how can we make it? And the West needs to pull, like China needs to push, and the West needs to pull. So whoever it is, listen to this. If you are in the West, and you want to figure out how to collaborate with Chinese open source, you will be a huge winner. Whoever figures out the puzzle, how do we bring this huge ecosystem into the West? These people will be the leaders. Because basically Shenzhen did this for industrial revolution, right? Shenzhen is the industrial factory of the world. Who will be the Western partners of the Shenzhen of open source, right? And Shenzhen of open source is all over China. Who will be the American and European collaborators who will take advantage of the open source Shenzhen of tomorrow, right? So these will be huge, huge winners. And I just don't see people in the West really kind of grasping this, right? Like it's a huge, huge opportunity. So that's what we need to work on, right? We have a lot of open source in China. How do we bring it into the world? How do we make people take advantage of it?
I see. So, last few questions, we make it short. So many communities fade away after initial excitement. Yet yours one have shown incredible longevity. So GOSIM is our third year. We have Paris and Hangzhou in this year, and last year is Netherlands and
Yes.
Shanghai.
Yes.
Yeah, one is in Europe and one is China. No, so last year is Beijing and Netherlands, and the first one in Shanghai is 2 years ago. So what is the secret to make a community long-term health and relevance?
So I think it's really the passion. You need to keep the passion, right? And you need to find passionate people. And I think the founders of GOSIM are really passionate. I've seen them present. So I think, and also, so first of all, you need to be passionate. And second, you need to really love technology and understand what makes good technology. Because you can be passionate as a community organizer, but if you don't understand technology, it's not enough. You need to have both. And so what I love about GOSIM, you're aligned with Rust, right? Yeah. And so Rust, again, like I come from a strongly typed programming background, type safety. So, I ran the biggest Scala meetup in the world. I love Haskell and OCaml and Clojure, and all this kind of was used to be niche. So Rust, I think, kind of really the first programming language, which on the one hand uses a lot of terminology and technology from strong types. On the other hand, it kind of went mainstream because it solved a lot of problems with C++ and C. Solve problems in security. It is applicable in embedded systems. It's high performance, right? So if you look at Python, Python is not really a language of AI. Python is now based on C++ and Rust. It's a thin layer, right? So tools like Pydantic, UV, right? They're all written in Rust. And Python has a thin kind of API on top of it, right? You're calling into like PyTorch or C++, right? So I think by kind of aligning with Rust, it's a very good choice because you get very good software engineers, right? And so I think that's kind of shows that the community cares about developer community itself, but also the strong leadership in technology, thought leadership. So I think that's the two pieces, right? And and like GOSIM is doing the same with AI. So as long as you identify the leaders and you love what they do, and right, like you find the people who inspire others, I think you will keep going.
See. So thank you for your time. I think that's all the questions. So for our audience, please be sure to follow the GOSIM Foundation on our official channels to stay updated on future events. And don't forget to subscribe to the Open AGI Forum for more conversation with the brightest minds shaping our technological future. So finally, Alexy, could you let everyone know where can they follow your work and learn more about Neo4j and get involved with the communities you're building?
Yes, so again, I wear many hats, so I'll just list kind of the resources. So Neo4j has a resource called Graph Academy, which is free. It's the best resource to learn about AI with knowledge, graphs, and memory. So if you Google Graph Academy and Neo4j, right, in any combination, you will find this is interactive, live resource, which spins up a Neo4j database for you in the browser, and you just go and learn everything about agents and LLM and knowledge graphs together, right? So this is a beautiful starting point. I would say do this for Neo4j, and that will put you in touch with Neo4j. For communities by the Bay, we have a conference called AI by the Bay, which for 11th year it runs in Oakland, California in November, and we have a workshop and hackathon with Llamastack and Meta, and then we have 2 days of talks, similar to GOSIM, kind of topics on AI and software engineering. So I highly recommend if you Google AI by the Bay, you will find us. Right, and we are all of our events on Luma, so lu.ma/_AI. So kind of Luma became the new meetup of the AI era, and so we do global events when we go to Berlin. We use Luma. So _AI is our calendar, right? So if you just look for _AI on Luma, you will find us, and you will find all the Bay Area events, and you will find global events, which we do as well.
That will be the longest advertisement of our channel.
You asked me, but I had to connect people, and I had to thank you, Eric, for all the great questions. Like this is a really very good opportunity to share and connect with. I'm really happy to connect with developers from China in open source community. I already actually met folks from Shanghai who invited me to their conference. I'm very happy to connect. So please, find me and find me on LinkedIn. Drop me a line. I'm very open to connect and talk about open source.
All right. So fantastic. So once again, thank you, Alexy, for your invaluable time and wisdom. So, and thank you to our global audience for tuning in to the Open AGI Forum at the GOSIM 100 2025. So remember to subscribe our channel, and goodbye for now.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Eric.